Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 5 of season 6. How is it going, everybody? We got some people on YouTube. We got some people on Twitch. So, most important thing, I need questions from everybody. If you're on Twitch, you can put a link to anything cool that you've seen, some Instagram animation or some credit sequence to a movie or some intro sequence to a TV show, whatever you find that you're got questions about or want to see if we can make it in Cinema 4D, feel free to post it. You can also just type up a question. Also, if you are on YouTube, you got to just type up a question. Good idea to type out the word question. If anybody in the chat sees somebody put a question, you really like what they're asking, you can second it. Not officially, just type in seconding blah, blah, blah's question, because that's always really cool. If you do put a link to somebody, I need to be able to see the artist's name or the studio name in order to actually be able to tackle it. If I can't give credit, we're not going to do it. But I super appreciate the questions. And if people don't have questions and we don't have a live stream. Okay, now let's see. Any news? Not a ton, but I do have over here. We've got a new, it's actually kind of cool, where Gumroad, which is the platform we used to sell all of our plugins, Gumroad has recently offered the ability to create bundles. And I've really wanted bundles. And one of the reasons we haven't made them is like, if you manually make a bundle, like you make a zip file and you put everything inside of it, every time you make any change to anything, you got to like update all the zips and people end up with different versions and whatnot. But if you get the bundle through Gumroad, then you essentially just get access to all the individual downloads. So we can just keep on updating everything as we go. So so we've got the new spline bundle, which is all 8 of our spline tools. Of course, that is the slicer, mesh to spline, ricochet, and then the 5 different tools that are included in the utility splines. So, smoothing and resample, reduction, cleanup, and Bezier or re-Bezierify. And yeah, it's a 30% off. So, massive amount off of the total. And I put an extra bonus 5% off if you're on Patreon, kind of supporting at any level. You can get an extra 5% off. So yeah, that's the best price you can get all of our tools. You can kind of get everything. I got links to all the individual tools and all their education, etc. So pretty exciting to be able to get that out there in the world. So if you're looking to support Rocket Lasso, the best way to do it is to support yourself as well by getting a tool that will help you unlock cool new abilities in cinema that you couldn't do otherwise. Let's see. Jumping back over here, checking the chat. Let's see. Nobody's actually put any questions up. So if nobody gets any questions going, then it's gonna be a really challenging stream, everybody. But I guess I got one last thing I can show. I've been playing around a little bit with particles. Let me switch to the laptop. Let's see if that works. Excellent, it did. Okay, so here we are on a different machine, and I've been playing with particles a bit. I made 2 different things. Do you remember last week during the live stream we did that cool technique where essentially we had a 2-dimensional pool of particles and we put that into a mesher, a volume mesher, and then I used Slicer to make a chop of it. Well, I was playing around a little bit with the technique and just made a couple of renders. So here was one. So you see there's actually quite a bit going on. You get this big pool of particles, but you see all the outlines. First of all, it's glowing only on the edges. And then you see all the particles are traveling around in a circle, like kind of circling the entire thing. And that's because there's an invisible slicer that's actually outlining the particles, but it's also kind of feeding back in where the slicer itself is telling everything to travel along it via field force. It's also like attracting the particles and keeping everything a little bit trapped. So when you kind of get these voids in the middle of this pool, suddenly you get like a hole in the mesh, and then that will now create an outline there, and then that becomes something that can spin. So it's a really kind of cool feedback you can do. And to a good, I haven't pushed it too far, but it even kind of gives you this really nice lip on the outside, where you kind of get this really coherent kind of setup there. And I think this one's nearly identical. Probably just, is this the one I went overboard on the lens flares? Yeah, very similar. This one was a little bit different. This one I did, it wasn't what I was trying to go for, so I didn't continue pursuing it. But it's the exact same thing, but you can actually see the effect. Well, first of all, you see I'm actually rendering the spline, so you can see the outline that's getting created. But there's something really interesting happening on this one where you see a feedback loop, because what's happened, there's a turbulence, and that little bit of turbulence is creating little, perturbations on the surface, like little imperfections. But what's happening is that this little arc, this tiny little push upward is now telling the particles like, oh, okay, travel in that direction. So as they're traveling up in that direction, that means they push even further in that direction. So you kind of get this instant feedback loop. So every tiny little bump that was created by turbulence will suddenly get exaggerated via this feedback loop, and you start getting these little tendrils going out, which is pretty cool. Now, as it keeps on, it looks really cool in the beginning. As you keep on going, it kind of pinches down to almost nothing, and then everything kind of becomes really chaotic. And I mean, very cool effect. I like it. It wasn't what I was trying to do at the time, but as far as a really nice tool to be able to put into the tool kit of all the particle stuff you can do. I really like that one. And then yesterday, Sterling, the very first Rocket Lasso intern, he had a question. Well, he was playing with particles, and he was trying to make a tornado. And every day that he's over here, I do a Cinema 4D demo for him, kind of on topics he's interested in. And so we sat down for quite a while, actually, and we started, because I've kind of had it in my head to try and make a tornado using the particles. And this wasn't the best version. It's the only one I saved the render of. But we were getting pretty far, and I was actually getting pretty pleased with like the way it was working. You can see like all, like some really nice swirling effects, and there's all just raw particles. So yeah, I left the spline to render in this one. Now it's completely covered up by particles, but but yeah, it's actually pulling the particles down and swirling, getting all these nice little imperfections. You can see that we've got this spline, and this was actually the more advanced version of the rig that was designed to, I can animate that spline around, and the tornado will move and adapt to it. So the simple version of this was relatively simple. The complicated version on this one ended up needing like a lot more work to make it cooperate. And there's still a lot more to explore in it, but I was pretty happy with the overall effect. I love like these clean swirls that we're getting, and that the concepts are straightforward, but we had a couple of failed attempts before we kind of finally got it to start working. But anyway, a couple experiments I've been doing, which I thought were kind of neat. Let's see. We did have 2 questions come in, and anybody who's just joining the stream, please get any questions you have together. But Simon was asking, you're wondering if there's any good way to get that plexus look with the new particle system, like that network node. How do I answer this question? I didn't read the question before I said it out loud. I guess I'll just say stay tuned on that one, on that question. So we're not going to specifically tackle it here, but stay tuned for that type of effect. Let's see. But then John had a question saying, how would you create a balloon or zeppelin that is neutrally buoyant using dynamics? That's an interesting question. And yes, hello everybody who's coming and hanging out. And Lignazio, I appreciate the subscription on Twitch. Subscribe for 25 months, which is impressive. I do appreciate it. So yeah, create a balloon or zeppelin that's neutrally buoyant using dynamics. There's a couple caveats to put in there. I mean, first of all, the assumption here is we want to do simulation stuff on it. We could use the old simulation system. We could use the new simulation system. In a new simulation system, this could be as simple as, just making a balloon. I mean, even saying that, it's like if we just make a simple balloon of some sort, we could just turn off gravity. And in a way, I feel like that's kind of valid, where let's do this. I'm going to make, we'll make a figure here just so we can kind of get a sense of scale. So, if this is going to be like a balloon, why don't we make it a bit bigger? How big did I make that? Is it too big? No, it feels kind of hot air balloon-ish. Maybe still a little small for that. So let's make it a bit bigger. So yeah, we'll make something pretty big there. And yeah, we got these polygons. We could probably increase that count a little bit. I got to remember that we've got this newer machine here, so should be able to handle a little bit more stuff. Let's see. So yeah, let's just start out by really straightforward. Let's add on a cloth tag, and with cloth apply to if we have play, then gravity is going to take over and the entire thing is going to fall. So it's okay, that's probably what you mean by you want to make it neutrally buoyant. But let's just say, once something is neutrally buoyant, it just means it doesn't want to go up or down. So in the world, let's say we're in the situation, we're making a force and we're making a turbulence, and we're gonna make I'm gonna make a very large scale turbulence of 1,000, set it to a 55 strength, which is just kind of a good number that you'll be sure to see something. And as we hit play, you see it's falling. And it's like, well, maybe the turbulence is doing something to it, but it's hard to tell. So the simplest possible thing, of course, would be Control D, simulation, scene, and then we put our gravity to 0. So now there's 0 gravity acting upon this object. So I can hit play, and now you see that's not moving, and only our turbulence is actually doing something on top of it. See, the turbulence is pretty weak, so I'm gonna make it 10 times stronger. So you can see, yeah, now this turbulence is blowing it around, and that's essentially neutral. And what's cool is like here you see the balloon starting to kind of crumple in on itself from the different forces. Even 1,000, you can see all the different turbulences pushing in. So I think my turbulence at 1,000 was nowhere near as big as I thought it would be. So jump it up to like something like 5,000. But yeah, now we get this larger wind kind of blowing around, and it's neutrally buoyant. Just it's going to go where the wind goes. Now, I don't think that's in the spirit of the question. I think the spirit of the question is going to be that we still want gravity turned on, and a couple other things I might want to do. I'm going to grab the balloon, and I haven't played with the claw stuff in a while, probably not since last season. I just haven't had a need to. But we can do some, we got mass, but then if we go to our balloon settings, we can activate that and we can start over pressuring. 1 is the default volume, but we could say 1.5, and now it wants to be 1.5 times the volume. So I'll say that happens over the course of 15 frames. So we hit play, and now you see it's actually inflating a little bit there, and that should kind of help keep it a little bit more rigid. So, that's fine. Now, so what I want to do is reactivate the gravity. So yeah, now there's default gravity back in the scene again. So now, yes, there's a turbulence, which right now is probably a little powerful. Now we've made it weaker. Now, so I'm going to bring the frequency way down. So like this, it's going to animate the noise more slowly. So yeah, now it's going to be blown in any random direction, and gravity is yanking it down. So we want to counteract that gravity. So mostly what I would start doing is just creating some different forces to counteract it. Because there's no, like in pyro, like the individual particles can have their own buoyancy, but there is no buoyancy concept inside of rigid body or inside of cloth. Like it just is what it is. So we need to essentially fake it, but we can fake it in really nice ways where we can say that there's a wind, and I love using this as a technique. We're going to make a wind. I'm going to hit R for rotate, and we'll aim it upward. So it's just pointing straight up. And right now this wind is technically applied to everything. Inside of our tag under forces, we could say include, or we can exclude it from other things. So in this type of case, it's always a pain, like, because sometimes I want inclusion, sometimes you want exclusion. So I can say include, but now we have to make sure we drag in the turbulence and the wind. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've got a wind which is blowing upward. I'm going to temporarily turn off the turbulence so we can just focus in on essentially counteracting the gravity. So if we have play right now, we have a very weak wind, and you see it starts falling like immediately. Give ourselves some extra frames. So now I'm going to start increasing the wind. I'm not sure, but I feel like the wind needs to be about 1,000. So I'm just going to guess. So now I typed in 1,000, and yeah, I think I was pretty much spot on, because this wind, in a good way, directly correlates to the gravity, and the gravity is minus 9,000, or yeah, 981. So if we did exactly that number, but the opposite, so get rid of that negative sign, and now this should be perfectly neutral. So that means other simulation objects. So let's make another sphere, move this up into the air, right click and add a rigid body to it. Now that should, I must need to be at 0 to initialize, or what did I do? Why is it not moving? Right click, simulation, rigid body, right? This one, everything is going to be getting the include exclude. So I'm going to say include and nothing. So now if I hit play, you'll see that include nothing. It's a rigid body, right? Not a collider. Why is it not moving? Am I just totally derping on this? Temporarily turn off the wind. That's a new sphere. Simulation, Yeah, rigid body. I'm not turning on the collider. So if I hit play, okay, now it's falling. But now if I activate the wind in the sphere under forces, I'm going to say exclude, but I'm going to say include, and then I'm saying include nothing. So if I hit play, yeah, that's weird. Look, is that a bug? Because I said include nothing. That means it's not including the wind, which means that should be falling. I'm going to go back to exclude, and I'm going to say exclude the wind, which I think will start working. Oh dear. Is the include exclude not working on the updated rigid body? Does anybody know? Does anybody know if that is indeed the case? I mean, we got the slider. Include, exclude, not moving. Include the wind, on, off, not making any difference. Huh. Well, that's a pretty major bug. They made a lot of changes to the rigid body, so that might have broken it. But yeah, that's interesting. Well, I guess we'll have to ignore that part of it. I mean, in theory, this is still I can, well, what I wanted to do was show that gravity was still affecting it and it could fall. I wonder if that's also broken on cloth. They didn't update cloth, so my assumption is going to be that this will work. So if we move this cloth up, I'm going to make it a lot smaller. And I'm going to say, don't include the wind. Don't include the turbulence. And that should just fall. It's still overpressured and whatnot. So if we hit play, yeah, that one's still working. So yeah, I think that's just a bug in the rigid body. Boom. And so the other one's inflated and way heavier. But yeah, now you see one thing is still, everything else in theory is still affected by gravity. But this balloon is now neutrally buoyant. Now, because it's so big, it gets a lot of mass automatically. So this tiny little one doesn't have any effect on it. But it's a thing. It's working. Okay, cool. So now that's neutrally buoyant. But you can actually make this even a little bit more interesting on top of that, where right now we said that this wind is neutrally buoyant, but you can do almost like a floating effect. Where now let's think of this a little bit more like water instead. And even this could be, rename this wind to, I might do wind dot buoyancy, if that's how you spell it. Probably not. Buoyancy. Is that two Y's? Maybe. Now let's pretend that this is like a ball and we want to have it be floating in water. Now I'm imagining this is a big giant rubber ball that would float in the water, kind of like a big giant basketball. So what I'm thinking is, it's like almost impossible to make that sink below the water level, because a basketball is really going to want to pop up out of the water. So in that case, I'm going to say that this wind is like way stronger. Let's see. I'm going to say, how strong do we want to go? I can say 3 times stronger, but even that I almost feel like isn't strong enough. So I'm going to say 5,000. So this is 5 times stronger than it used to be. Now, of course, if I hit play, this thing is immediately going to start rising up into the air because of how strong that force is. But now, if we want to treat this like a layer of water, we can do something like, I'm going to make this plane just to visually represent it. But let's say that is now going to be the surface of the water for us. So let's just add a few colors in here so we're not just staring at a completely blank white screen. There we go, giant basketball. And now with our wind, I'm going to say that I'm going to actually make it a child of the plane. We'll just name the plane water. And now we make a field, and I'm going to make a linear field. And we aim that. I always get these backwards. So I'm going to say y plus. Is it not refreshing? Oh, okay. I rotated the wind, so the rotation of this is relative to that. So I'm going to say z plus, and I can give it a little bit of fall off, but in theory, I can make it pretty small. And I'm also going to grab let's grab both spheres, and I'm going to move it way up into the air. Okay, cool. So now, when I hit play, this linear field needs to be minus. Okay, so what's happening is full power was getting applied to it, but now, essentially, we have a very strong wind to act like a water buoyancy. So if I hit play, this is going to fall with gravity, but as it starts sinking into the ground, now that wind starts to affect it. And the wind is so strong that's kind of like an anti-iceberg. It's very, very buoyant up on the top, so it's pushing it there. And thanks to the structure, the structure and the inflation of this ball, it's actually maintaining its shape. I think it might be kind of interesting if I'm going to make it a little bit weaker. So let's say that this wind will be 2000, so double what gravity is. And I'll say that the sphere isn't going to be inflating anymore. And I'm not entirely sure what happens, but what I imagine is that the top is going to start to, oh, that's interesting. Blurp. The wind, I thought maybe it is just kind of structural enough. So I'm going to make it weaker. So I'm going to say that you are very bendy. And I'll even say it's a little bit stretchy. And is that enough to, yeah, okay, that starts, I'm going to turn off that little guy. I just want to see what happens if we let this fall, and then is like, are the forces only pushing on these points, which I imagine they are. Yeah. And the top part is going to start collapsing down because it can't hold the weight, and wind is blowing up on this entire thing, but the top is just going to fall down into it. And that depends on how much bendiness and how much stretch that we give this. So we could say it's very bendy, and I imagine, yeah, it's going to collapse down a lot more, and eventually just find its neutral point. Now, I'm not saying we actually want to do that. So we can put this back to normal, and now we get our buoyancy. And depending on how strong this wind is, then it's going to determine how far into the water it can actually float. But you can actually get some pretty cool, like, watery floating effects by doing this type of thing. Like you take that, put some turbulence on top of it, let things drag around. So it's a very simple version of buoyancy, but the ability to use this fall off inside of the wind, like, it's pretty straightforward, and just seems to work pretty well. Who asked that question? Let's see. Paul, was that Paul? Nope, that's not. That's up further. Is John. John, did this kind of cover what you were interested in as far as this question, as far as making something kind of neutrally buoyant? Because in a way, I don't think we can actually make this a child. Well, maybe we can, but it's, in a lot of ways, I would just want to make this a child of the sphere, and be like, oh, I've applied. Well, if this was back when it was just floating, because now I think it would move. No, I forget. This is not like the other one. So yeah, we can't actually make that child. And it's kind of like, oh, I've now added a buoyancy property. It's almost like we put buoyancy into the tag, and I'm just representing it via this wind. But yeah, I think it's a straightforward, but a pretty cool effect. And then, yeah, even here, we could turn that turbulence back on again, and the turbulence should be blowing this thing around all over the place. It might be pretty strong, so I might calm that way down. Whoa, yeah, the scale is huge, but the strength is pretty huge as well. So yeah, a little bit of turbulence, and the hope here would be it's kind of like it would be churning and kind of bouncing around on the surface. I'm trying to think of a really easy way. I guess we could. It would just take a long time to calculate, but technically we could take the surface and we could make the entire thing like deforming and, like, kind of creating ripples and whatnot, and then based on that, have the buoyancy get applied. But it would be pretty heavy on the calculation for cinema. I mean, this is not that many polygons, but we could do it. But unless somebody's specifically interested in that, I will save it. See. Boop. Let's see. We have a bunch of questions popping in, which thank you, everybody. I super appreciate it. Justin, thank you for the donation. And you're also mentioning, do I expect to see a rise in C4D plugins since ChatGPT 4 was a thing? And am I surprised by how the plugin landscape has barely changed? No, I'm not surprised at all. Now, I will say, well, it goes to, like, I am not, let's switch the screen. I am not a fan of the AI art generation, but I'm actually very against it. It's kind of fun. What's the right way to say it? If it's being used in any kind of professional context, I feel like it's pretty unethical of the companies to have taken all this data and information from all these artists without their permission and then used it. Like, I feel like there's no moral gray zone there. It's like, oh, you've taken a bunch of people's creative work, used it to synthesize new things, and they're not getting any credit for it, and you're taking work from them. Like, that's just bad across the board for artists. Isn't it kind of funny and ironic that with all the promises of AI, you think back, like, whatever, 5-10 years ago, it was always like, oh, like, AI is going to come and it's going to get rid of all the drudgery. Like, there no more manual labor. And then instead, the first thing AI came for was like the creative jobs, like creative writing and, copy and images and, soon videos. So all that's pretty crazy. Having said that, I use ChatGPT. I use it a lot for like grammar correction where I'm writing up something, and it can work really well when it's like, hey, I've written a giant paragraph, but hey, give me the 2 sentence version, and then I'll take it and tweak it, and then it's like, okay, cool, I've prepared my tweet a little bit more. It can behave as a personal assistant in some pretty cool ways. Now, all the way through when they first had 3, and then once they had 4, and the different systems, you got Gemini and you got Claude. I've tinkered with pretty much all of them, but we have attempted to use it as a research assistant when we're researching plugins, and it sends you down the wrong path. If there's somebody who thinks that they can just start coding a plugin and have ChatGPT do it for you, it's not going to do it. Like, at best, it can help you do a little bit of research. At best, it's like, hey, is there this type of function? Well, here's a good example. And here's another thing that I feel like pretty well versed in the way AI actually works. And a lot of it, you have to consider what training data was put in there. So, let's say you're making a button for a website, and you're like, okay, well, this is a real world example. It's something I actually did. I went to MailChimp and I wanted to make a button that would link, or it's like a link to sign up for the newsletter. And it created a button, but I didn't like the font, and I didn't like the color, and I don't know much about like formatting stuff for the web. So I copied the code it had, I put in ChatGPT, and I said, hey, I want to change the font, and I want to change, this and this. And it was able to do it instantly. It was like, here's a correction, here's the thing, and it instantly worked. But why did that work? It worked because millions and millions of websites exist online, and tons of tutorials and tons of education and tons of stuff. There's so much information about fixing stuff with like CSS and everything on the web that there's a lot of information for it to draw from. But how much raw information about making Cinema 4D specific plugins exists on the web? Like, not that much. Like, there's very little that's going to be open. So what ends up happening is, even when you prompt it, and I feel like I'm pretty good at making prompts, even when you prompt it very, very carefully, if you say, hey, I want to do this thing, it will just make up functions. Like, essentially, for anybody who doesn't know, the way large language models work, LLMs, which is pretty much almost all this stuff is all based on like LLM type technology. It's not like it's thought about it and then it's like, here's my response. It is literally, it says a word, and then after it says a word, it goes, well, based on like my statistical Plinko machine, what is the next most likely word to appear here? And it just keeps on doing that again and again and again. And if it needs a 5,000 word answer, then it's essentially doing a intelligent autocorrect on every single subsequent word. So essentially, it doesn't know what it's about to say. It only after it's made the word does it know what it is. And if you say like, why did you do this? Then it's just making something up about it. Like, there's no coherence, there's no intelligence behind it. So even if you tell any of these systems, you're like, hey, be very careful, only give me real answers, only like double check, like, it's like, maybe that could slightly improve like the Plinko machine of it doing these decision trees, but it's not actually processing that like a person would. So the point is let's say we're doing some function where it's like, hey, we're doing a function that we have a point in space, and we want to feed it a mesh, and now we want it to give us a function for how do we find the nearest polygon to a point in space. It'll say something like, oh, use C4D dot parentheses, and it just makes up a function. It just makes it up, and it's like, use that. And it's like, but that's not a real function. That doesn't exist in the SDK. And you say, well, that doesn't exist. And it's like, oh, sorry, that was my mistake. And then make something else up. So as soon as you're trying to do anything that's not the most obvious, most basic thing, it just breaks down. So for anybody who's like, oh, I can just jump in having no idea what I'm doing and develop and compile a plugin, like, it's just not going to happen. Not right now, maybe eventually. But I think it could potentially make it so that your research into it is helpful. And I will say, I have found myself I end up doing a lot of like random research on various things. And I find the LLMs powerful for that type of thing. Instead of Googling, Well, here's what I find actually those are the absolute best thing is, and to me, it's one of the most tricky things is when you don't know enough about something to even ask the right question. Like, like I said yesterday, Sterling was like, "Oh, I'm trying to make a tornado effect." It's like, okay, cool. Like he could voice the question, but when you're like, here's an example. Way back in the day, me and my friends we printed up a gigantic version of the board game Risk, like a huge one. We printed it up to be the exact dimensions of a pool table, and then we were like, "Oh, you would be really cool is if we had those sticks that generals would use, and we could like push the soldiers around." And we had no idea what that was called. And this is years and years ago. And essentially, all you could do back then was Google it, and essentially we could not formulate the question in such a way that we could Google the answer properly. You'd have to be like, well, what's the stick generals use in all the movies? And you just have to hope that somebody in a forum post had asked pretty much that exact question and somebody had the answer. But now you can use the LLMs to ask these vague questions. And because it does have, I don't want to say comprehension, but the Plinko machine of decision trees can be like, oh wait, you're talking about generals and you're talking about sticks and you're talking about moving armies. Like, oh, and it can tell you like, oh, you're talking about a croup stick. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. And now you can go and start doing proper research where you start, Googling things or looking it up and doing that. So I've used it in that way probably like 1,000 times of like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, what is this? So for getting the broad information that you don't know, it's really good for that. But anyway, I don't think people are going to be able to make plugin, proper plugins or anything for a while. Like, I don't even know, I haven't tinkered with it, but um um Charlie B, yes, we do need to connect. I hope everything's going well. What was I gonna say? Oh, like I could imagine that maybe if somebody's like, oh, I want to make myself like a little script, like I want to make a script to select a bunch of objects and create a null and put each one in a null. Like maybe if you ask the right questions, it can give you the correct lines of code for that. Maybe. But it to me right now, it's just as likely it gives you the wrong bit of information. It sends you down the wrong path. And now instead of if you had gone onto like the plugin cafe forum and looked it up properly or just read the SDK, you might have found the answer in 10 minutes, but now the LLM sent you down a half-hour long wrong path. So it's all over the place. So it's really hard to say. Anyway, I have very strong opinions on AI. Oh yeah, when it came to the art stuff, that's what I was gonna say. Is like it really bothers me as soon as somebody's using it for profit. But I always thought like it's when it comes to any of the image generation, it's like, oh, this would be really cool for a DM generating images for his party, where it's like this person was never going to spend the money to get to get custom an image of some side character, but it's like, oh wait, I'm gonna type in grumpy innkeeper with a huge pipe, and then um and then it'll make that image and you're like, hey everybody, here's what the character looks like, which is a funny way that it was popped in my head to that was the most valid use case I could think of it, where it's doesn't bring in the morality. um do 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 do. Let's see, people talking about plexus effect. Um, mm, 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 mm. Insight, yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Luminetrix had a question. Can we accumulate piles of dust or sand like in this Houdini simulation? I don't know. Let's find out. I'll pop it up on the screen in a second.
Hey, Chicago.
There's a commercial playing. I'm also going to keep it kind of tiny in the screen so that it doesn't pop up with the copyright protection. What are we? Yeah, okay, this is somebody's dune sand simulation. I will click here. So this is from Lucky Paws 3D. And let's see what they got. Oh, very nice. Yeah, that is, well, first of all, that's not a particle simulation. Was this asked as a particle simulation question? Because that's not particles. That's displacement, if I ever saw it. Interesting. Um, yeah, now, okay, yeah. You did not claim that it was particles. Um, oh, wait, no. You didn't, but now you're saying that you think it is particles and that, yes, it is a particle question. I'm going to read their description. Made in Houdini using the height field data structure. That does not sound like particles. So yeah, they are not claiming particles either. So first of all, it goes to inside of Cinema. Now we're back on my laptop. Open up a new file. Inside of Cinema, let's just as a speed test, let's see how many particles we can throw at this and make it even vaguely like that effect that we're seeing. So I'm going to right click on this and say simulation collider. I'm going to crank the friction up to be 100%, zero bounce. Let's say it's going to collide on both sides. Now let's create my particle layout. I'll create a basic emitter and circle R for rotate, spin it 90 degrees, move it up into the air. Let's get a figure in here just so we're getting that little reminder of the size. And honestly, that's actually pretty good. Basic emitter size, I'm going to drop it down to 5 by 5 by 5. And I'm going to constantly emit, let's start out with 1,000 particles per frame. Let's say that the color, we'll make it kind of a darkish sandy color so we can actually see it. I'm going to tell my particle group to show it at double size and hit play. And let's just see what we get. So we should be getting a stream of particles going. Excellent. So now we want this to start colliding with the ground. We already put the collision on there. So let's create a collide, and instantly that's going to be interacting with the ground. The collide tag right now is set to bounce. So I'm going to say no bounce, lots of dynamic friction. It's based on intersection, which we'll just have to see. Like right now, none of them are escaping through, which is good. I'm going to give us way more frames. And okay, cool. Now I'm going to continuously save this one because, like, essentially our goal here is to push the limits, and it's going to start getting, well, the unfortunate thing is that it's going to get slower and then slower particles pile. It's going to get slower and slower and slower, which means the last frames are going to be exponentially long as compared to the first ones. So anyway, we've got these falling, doing their thing. Now, personally, I think they're probably moving way too fast for us to do this. So we'll just layer this up as we go. So very first thing, and essentially the only way we can do particle on particle interactions right now is flocking. Well, predator prey as well, but let's do flocking. And with the flocking, we have to do this in a particular order as well. So collide comes after the flocking. So essentially this is saying what I want to do is have zero coherence, but we're going to want really strong separation strength. Now, right now it's a radius of 1. Let's just see what that looks like to start out with. So now the particles are pushing apart from each other, and you can see that those are actually all, they're all drifting, doing their own thing. Right now, actually, I'm going to say the particles have a speed of 0, and then we'll create a gravity. And so gravity comes first. Gravity is going to be continuously telling everything to fall down. So now these all fall, and now you're going to actually see that we're going to start getting something that kind of looks like a pile of particles all spreading apart. But I don't know how large these grains should be. I mean, because the size of dot will be the same size no matter how far we zoom in or out. So just keep that in mind. But right now, I'm telling those to display, well, honestly, that doesn't even matter. All we have to do is go to my flocking setting. Right now, it's a separation radius of 1.5. I'm going to drop it down to 1. And, those are now allowed to be closer together. Now you're going to start getting this jittering effect. And look, we're even kind of getting this emergent grid pattern. Not quite sure about that. But what we need to do, I'm going to start adding in some friction. So friction, that comes before the collide as well. How far can we go? Okay, I'm going to go a little bit overboard on the friction because, you can already see that's making these particles slow down, and particles wouldn't slow down from falling gravity that much. But you see, as I keep on pushing, these are going to slow down. And the goal here is to make these not slide out too far, because what I'd love to do is have them start piling up on top of each other. And right now, I don't really feel like we're getting that effect. Like they're spreading out a lot. So this really strong gravity might be making it. How do we explain this? There's so many variables. I have found that the friction isn't very frictiony. So we're going to keep on cranking it up higher. I'm going to say 1,000%. Let's start it again. So is this super high friction enough for this to slide? But you see, they're still kind of freely sliding as they go. So, and then, yeah, I'm not sure about the emergence of, there must be something here that actually works on a grid for calculating it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's these collisions. So out of curiosity, we see this grid size right now. If we change our subdivisions here, does that change? Seems similar. But yeah, I'm curious where that emergent little grid effect is. I'm going to shrink this down because we don't need that much room. We might as well use all the data. But yeah, these jittering out of their way, pushing off to the side. Control D, particles, and I'm going to say, give me an extra substep, which can go a long way. And I mean, it goes back to me. This just is largely going back to a question of friction. So I'm going to say, give me 10 times stronger friction, 100 times stronger friction. And I'm not even sure if these two multiply on top of each other. So I'm going to keep on cranking that. But you see, these are still just willing to slide further and further out. So yeah, I have found friction to be wanting. I'm going to increase that again. Is it just not pushing? I think we're just getting a large enough radius. But yeah, these are still scooting along based on like all these different forces pushing on top of each other. So I thought we might be able to get some pretty good piling going on right away. Actually, if we were two-dimensional would be helping. And this might be a situation that two-dimensional might be a good way of us doing testing. But I wanted to push the limits of seeing these stack. Right now, because of the way this is working, I'm going to change this to be a radius. I'm going to say a radius of 1, and that might actually help a lot, I have found. But is this actually real? I don't know. So let's see if I can explain. Okay, now those are falling, and they actually seem to be sticking, but based on a radius. I don't know for sure if that's real. I've got the sneaky suspicion that this radius is kind of like a series of tiny spheres on the surface that create these little grooves that stuff gets stuck in. So I'm going to say 0.1. And actually, let's go 0.01. So like really trying to, actually, maybe there's some sort of minimum. But yeah, now they're floating off the ground, but they are stopping. So now let's try and drag this stuff back to a reasonable friction. And actually, we can see if this is a combination of the two. But see, yeah, here I just put this at 0 friction. Oh yeah, are we getting the opposite problem now? Which would be funny. So as I crank up the friction, it's almost like the friction doesn't care anymore. I'm saying 0 friction on here. Let's go back into collide, and I'm going to say 0 friction there. And now with 0 friction, everything just gets stuck. So as soon as you turn on radius, that's what I have found in the past, is that everything just gets stuck. So for our purposes right now, this might be fine. Like it's not what I want it to do, but it might be good enough. So now we've got what for a grain of sand, and this isn't exactly a grain of sand, but you see it's all pretty much perfectly flat. So I think that's going to be largely a variable of the gravity being really strong. Like it's just pushing it down too hard. So if we lower the gravity down, my hope is, let's grab our flocking, because you see they're still pretty far apart. I'm gonna grab my flocking and say like 0.1. We're gonna set the alignment radius down to 0.2. And now the hope is that these are going to push apart from each other, but they're allowed to be pretty close. And the hope is that the first ones of them with very little gravity pushing down, and now with it going so slow, I might move it closer to the ground. I'm definitely gonna move it closer to the ground. That's painful. Okay, cool. So now let's just see if we get anything. The hope is gravity's so gentle. Oh no, it's that radius thing. See how they're automatically snapping to the surface? That's this collide being set to radius. Like it's very frustrating. Now we could switch a group. Would that be a good idea? Like when we go back to a regular old intersection, suddenly, yeah, see now there's allowed to intersect with each other. So it's not exactly what I want to do, but I'm going to, when these collide with the ground, I'm going to switch it to a new group. So I'm going to say particle group, and I'll just say that this is particle group collided. Okay, cool. And That's fine. So when it collides, it's going to switch to this group. And once it's in that group, which means it's actually touched the ground, I'm just going to make it be, it's stuck. It's not going to move anymore. So to do that, I'm just going to make a math. I'm going to say assign a velocity speed of 0. So once it switches to this group explicitly, it's going to stop. Now this flocking is currently set to only apply to that group, and friction comes after. It's a very high friction as well. Collide comes before gravity. So I'm going to yank all of those out. Do I want to yank them all out? I might not. I'm not sure. I'm going to pull my flocking and my friction out. So now those are applying to both groups because I want one group to see the other one. So let's do that. Give it a little bit of time. That seems to be going way slower. I don't know why that's, doesn't feel like it should be going that slow. What's causing that? Is it the flocking? No. Is it the collide? No. I'm not sure what's causing that to be so slow. I have had like weird little hiccups when like it just wants to go slow for no particular reason. Okay, so we're still colliding above the surface a little bit. So, and it is, I think it is successfully switching to this other group and then thus not moving. Actually, yeah, we can tell that it is because they're suddenly changing to a smaller radius. I'll tell it to be the same radius. And the hope would be is as these particles start to gather up, that the flocking is going to push them away enough. Let's get rid of the friction. Whoa, look at what friction wasn't doing that. Do you see what I mean? Where suddenly my frame rate just went like super high. I don't know why that happens. It's something, seems to be some property of this laptop. Anyway, okay, so those are falling. They're colliding. I'm going to go back to my flocking and say, hey, give me, I'm going to go overboard and say a separation strength of 5. So these really want to push apart from each other. And they're going relatively, you see they're really flinging each other apart there. So maybe we do need some friction just to calm those down. And let's see, are we starting to get any thickness? I mean, I don't really want to say that we are. Look at these like weird floaters hanging out in other places. We'd have to do some more tests for sure. But I don't know why. Am I doing something? Am I messing something up? Because I feel like if we were doing this 2-dimensionally, we'd be having a lot more luck right now. And I do kind of want to do a test along those lines. So, okay, so here's my thought. We're going 2-dimensional. I like going 2-dimensional. So we're going to rotate this back to the original orientation, pull it up in the air. If I hit play, you see the same thing's going to happen. It's making particles, gravity's going to pull them down. Now, I'm going to make another math. Actually, I'm going to leave this math completely outside the entire hierarchy. I'm going to say assign a constant 0 to the position of Z. So now I've forced everything to be 2-dimensional, which in theory, yeah. So now you see a very different kind of setup. Okay, couple things we need to do now. First of all, like we did so many settings on this. That's a triangle mesh. Put the friction back up because it doesn't matter. But our collide switches group based on the intersection, but still weird how far away from the surface it is. And now we've got our flocking, which I'm thinking is still maybe too large of a radius because these are really flinging apart from each other. So how small do we need to go? 0.02? Okay, better. Yeah, okay, so the hope is, yeah, new particles are getting made and they're pushing away from the other ones. It's a little bit It's a little chunky. Even at 0.2, those are really flinging apart. We're not getting very nice behaviors right now. In a way that I'm expecting it to be doing a little bit better than it is right now. Like, other tests I've done have worked brilliantly along these lines. So what's going on here? Like this stuff here. I mean, I did put a lot of separation strength. So I'll calm that down a little bit. Okay, are we starting to finally get some stacking going? Well, sort of. Let's turn off. I'm going to stop the collide from switching groups because all of these are freezing. But they're freezing like in all these different positions that I don't like. Look at these fling apart from each other. This seems strange to me. Gravity, collision, flocking's coming after. Maybe that isn't great. No, interesting. Collisions, but see how the collisions are like passing underneath? Like there's we could do math stuff and whatnot and like stop that from happening, but that's a little intense. The friction, put another 0 on that, calm everything down. Separation strength 0. Separation radius, very jiggly. I don't like any part of this. Okay, let me think. Do we want to start this over again? Do I open up my demo file where I did have kind of a basic fluid thing going? Because that would actually be a pretty good testing ground. But I feel like I'm just missing something basic here. That's particles 2. Let's see. Flock grid fluids. Yeah, okay. So yeah, this is a demo I had done like a while ago. Let me make sure that this is running on the GPU now. So what this does is it makes a giant cluster of particles, but look how well everything's running here. Now keep in mind 2-dimensional, but now you can see that everything's behaving a lot more like a fluid. And look at these are like kind of calm. You can actually see what they're doing. Like everything's just working better here. And I'm curious what I just fundamentally was doing differently. Like this only has one substep. We've got a very similar stack where you got frictions and gravity. It's probably a very weak gravity. Before we were trying to fight the gravity. Wouldn't it be interesting if it's just strong gravity was causing trouble? These have cohesion strength. Let's get rid of that. See if that gives us anything terribly different. Because now they don't, with no cohesion, they don't care about sticking to each other. They're just kind of, now they do still kind of look like they're hanging out near each other, but that's incidental. And then maybe it just doesn't like really, really tiny scales. So I'm going to increase the substeps to 3. And now you can see everything's colliding like way more accurately, which is pretty cool. So now, if I say that these radiuses are really small, is it going to start like freaking out? Maybe. They do seem more chaotic when they're really tiny. So this flocking, there's no randomness here. It feels a lot like kind of rain striking the ground. But no, that, I mean, like they're pretty jittery down there, but that's not horrible. But maybe just tiny, maybe tiny is just clunkier. Whee! But anyway, we can explode those back up into being kind of a fluidish simulation. So now if we go back to, um, trying to see if we can get these to pile up at all, like, do we have that ability? And a lot of that goes to, I mean, if we just let this run, the lack of friction, in the scene, I think, is going to stop these from kind of piling up. Like they are behaving a little bit more like you'd expect water to, because they don't have particle on particle. Yeah, they don't have particle on particle friction. So for the most part, I feel like all these will flow off one side or the other, given enough time. Where you won't even have a pile because there's nothing holding them together. Oh, it looks like it's slowly slowing down. Now, if we gave it some cohesion strength, then they do want to hang out near each other, but that's not the same as friction. It's weird how those every once in a while just fall down on the ground. I wonder if these ones on the bottom are getting squished from all the weight, and eventually the weight is lower, and then like a bunch of them kind of fling up. But if we gave them that separation strength, but if we gave them a cohesion strength that's slightly larger than the separation strength, so let's even double it. So they do want to hang out near each other now pretty strongly at a larger radius. So it should make everything behave a little bit more like a liquid. It's going to take a while to get it into that final position. So why don't we put this more down to a pile? And I have no idea how many fewer we need, but let's see what that does. Boop. All right, not bad. So it's a little bit more of a blob, but yeah, they're still falling apart from each other. So now, experimentally, let's start making the flocking bigger and bigger, because as the flocking gets bigger, it's going to want to kind of ooze over the sides. We might need the strength to be stronger, but at a certain point, these are going to, yeah. Now you see we're starting to get like that when you get pulled up because the radius is so large. But yeah, now you see we do kind of get a discrete blob of them. And then we could start increasing our cohesion strength. And I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, yeah, good. I was like, if we increase the cohesion strength, I wouldn't be surprised if they start like climbing on top of each other. But you always have to make sure your separation strength is at least as strong as your cohesion, because otherwise they'll just all collapse into like a singularity effectively. And realistically, you want your separation strength to be slightly higher than your cohesion. I'm not okay there. That one calmed down. But yeah, now look, see, now we get this coherent blob, but a blob is very different than very, very different than the idea of a pile of sand. I mean, just for fun, let's keep on increasing this. So I'm gonna make the cohesion even stronger, but then the separation strength even stronger still. I gotta do separation strength before I do cohesion. But yeah, these are already all on top of each other, so it seems confusing. But before they kind of calm down eventually. Separation strength, smaller radius. Actually, maybe that makes sense. I'm gonna keep on making the separation strength stronger, because what might be happening is cohesion is such a large radius. Maybe it doesn't need to be that large of a radius. Yeah. But, well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. A large radius might mean that the forces are all additive on each other, and the big radius overcomes the power of the separation strength. It's possible. Blurb. But yeah, it's kind of fun to see them all like climb on top of each other and form a blob. Eventually, it should form one big blob. But is it going to collapse into a singularity? I don't know. Yeah, it's starting to. Sometimes, yep, collapsing in. So yeah, I do think a large radius contributes to the overall power of something, and then potentially we could counteract it by having stronger and stronger separation forces. But yeah, I think it's just adding a lot of energy into the system. So yeah, now I counteracted with friction. We get a lot of jitter, but that's not necessarily surprising given the environment we just shoved these into. But yeah, but well, it goes to like, it's almost like this is now has surface tension to a degree, which is pretty good. Um, but I don't know how coherent they can be. Like if we spawn it up higher, do they still get the fall? Or is it like there's so much friction. We got to keep that in mind. We put so much friction that's going to be draining the gravity pull as well. It does look like in general, they're slowly moving downward, but that really high friction is going to be killing off the gravity. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, essentially we don't have good particle on particle stuff. The best I've gotten is essentially this scene file. Um, yeah, the best I have is the scene file where you kind of get this big old liquid-ish, this two-dimensional kind of liquid-looking simulation, which I'm pleased with. Like it works well for what this is, but we just can't go any further than this. Let's see. Ulf, thanks for subscribing again. 11 months. Appreciated. Now, if we go back to the original question, is there any, and I'm not making any assumptions here, is there any possibility of us being able to do this as displacement as it seems to claim that this is? The reason why I'm skeptical of it, and let's hit play on it again. The reason I'm skeptical of us being able to do that is I can't think of any way of, not literal shadow, but there's no way I can think of these sand shadows or like a wind shadow where the wind is blowing. Essentially what's happening here is it seems like any exposed area of displacement that is exposed to the wind is becoming weaker. And then these areas that are hidden from the wind is getting stronger. Like that's mathematically what I'm saying. And all these little ripples and whatnot would just be, in theory, different noises we could drop on it. Like maybe there's more to it than that, but maybe not. So making these shadows, wind shadows, is that possible? Even more than that, I'm trying to think of how could we make, okay, so here's where my head is at. My current question is, if we had a vertex map on here, so heavily subdivided, right click, other, vertex map. If we have a vertex map and we have a bunch of noise, let's say we just start out with some random noise, how could we make, as a matter of feedback loop, how could we make all that noise travel in a direction to essentially simulate wind? Because if we could make it travel to the left, maybe we could create some sort of feedback loop and potentially make some sort of shadowing. But even making that want to travel, maybe, well, the only way I can think is that we physically move the object. Does that give us anything? Let's, I mean, just as an exercise, I can think of a couple of little things. The problem is I want to think of a perfect cycle that we can do here and not make it like this insanely long object. Because if we could loop it, obviously a cylinder could loop, but even that would still be pretty heavily subdivided. We could make it kind of like a tractor trail, or a tank tread is what I'm trying to say. If we made it get like a tank tread and let it loop around, that's the best I can think of. Is that a good idea? I'm not sure. All right, we're gonna get weird with this one, and I have no idea. Essentially, I'm starting to explore this without knowing subsequent steps, which is not a recipe for something overly successful. So essentially, we're going to make a prime. That's going to be like the main plane. We're going to have a secondary plane. The secondary plane is going to be twice as long, 800, and double the subdivision. And then we create a spline wrap on plane 2, and it's correct orientation out of the box. So then we put in this rectangle. Let's make sure it's on the correct. Well, okay, those axis is correct, but the orientation's wrong. So we have to go under rotation. And can we give it an up vector? No, so we'll just type in 90 and hopefully, yeah, that rotates it. Okay, cool. Now there's an offset and it's not clamped, which is excellent. So we can take this offset and I don't know how fast I want it to be. So I'm just going to keyframe. I hit Control D, animation linear, and now keyframe the offset to go to 100% over 90 frames. Okay, I got that correct. And now let's right click. And now I'm going to make our animation longer. Right click on offset, say animation. Please show me the track, show track. Selecting on offset, we can now say after I want it to continue. So that will just repeat forever. Is the idea. So if I hit play, we should have this track constantly kind of rolling around forever. Cool. So, that's fine. That's working. And we have this vertex map on the original object. Yeah, here. Okay. That's step 1. Okay. So that's an experiment. Now, how do we initialize this with a particular state? Like I said, I was kind of doing this without a plan. So pretty much what I want to do is make a random noise field. Make we'll make a random noise field, noise-based, Perlin. Naki's pretty good sand. Paint that up. So now we get that, but I want it actually. Well, I want that. I want to be able to reset it. That's a challenge. I could freeze it. But does that work? Like with that freeze on there? Like that does freeze it, so it's stuck on there. I think without that, yeah. See, without that, we're passing through the noise. With this, it's stuck on there. So let's increase the contrast. The freeze is, by the way, going to be constantly stopping it from refreshing. But again, I'm not so sure about this freeze thing. But anyway, the freeze will make it so that it's taking the initial state and it's sticking it to it. So that can be a reference vertex map. So I'll just name this start. By the way, that's traveling really fast. So, but the way I set it up, it's pretty easy for me to go back, grab the original keyframe, and because it's continuing, I can say actually over 90 frames, you've only gone 10%. So you see everything's way slower, and it will still go forever. So we've got a rotating vertex map. That's something. So now we've got this plane here, which I must want to say that this is going to be like a shadow map where maybe we can feed a random field. Let's go Luca. Let's go pretty dang big. make another curve. And yeah, pretty much something like that. Maybe a different one so that we get something that looks a little bit more like a rock. One of these Voronoi will probably work well. Yeah, those could be kind of some rocks. I want to invert that. So we can invert. So if those are rocks, and now we've got this other map. This is going to get, like I said, this is going to get weird. So we got this other map that's traveling around doing its thing. And it's kind of like the updated wind blowing stuff. So rocks. Can we make a second vertex map? I'm just going to name this one test for now. So test is going to not look at any of that stuff. It's going to look at this vertex map. So now you see this one is projecting the sand material from the other one. So that's kind of like where we get our loop from. And honestly, I'm just going to hit T for scale and scale this down so that, you know, it's actually on the treadmill and we don't have that kind of fade on the edge. Okay, cool. So yeah, so all of that work so that I can have a living vertex map traveling. And I couldn't just animate the noise to travel across. That wouldn't be a feedback loop. So Ignazio, I might want to go check out the tutorial you were talking about, but you're talking about the previous grains of sand thing. But cloth simulation applied. Yeah, interesting. But I'd have to look into that. Okay, so now we've got this vertex map. It's referencing the start one. And I'm also going to tell it to reference the rocks. Okay. And I might want a slightly different rock pattern. I think a little smaller and a little more clamped out. Yeah, smaller rocks. Okay, cool. So now we are referencing the rocks and we're referencing that. So now if I say multiply, it's erasing out the rocks from where that is. Can we make that treat it like a shadow now? Can we make a sand shadow? I can't just, can we? Oh, okay. Here's a thought. I need this to be on the other object. So this one is still generating those rocks, but now this is referencing them. And now this new map is going to can we do the shadow? I don't think we can do this because it's going to be feeding back on itself, I think. Because if we do, I want a decay. And if we increase this, it's going to start erasing it out. But if we say minimum, which is not something we do very often, and I crank it up 100%, okay, that does actually, that is smearing it out. We are now, you can now see I've now made a shadow from that. And I think if we restart, it resets, which is good. So now anything that passes over that rock, it blocked out that, and now that starts getting more empty behind it. Which is interesting. So how do we maybe tricky. Can we add? Can we add to the effect only right here? That would be super weird, but maybe. How do I do that? I'm going to turn that off temporarily. I'm going to make a solid just to make sure I'm doing, that there's something. I say normal 0. So there's nothing in the beginning. Okay. And then I'm going to make a random field. We're getting weird here. Actually, let's reference this random field because that's already there. Random field. I'm going to turn off that stuff. We don't need it yet. Okay. So there's a random field. We need to do some cropping on it, but I'll say that there's a mask on it, and the mask is going to only allow this where the cylinder is, and the cylinder is along Z plus. And we'll stretch that way out, so it's essentially infinity. Okay, cool. So cylinder, mask out the random field. Cool. And it might actually, this is going to get so weird, but I like it. Okay, so cylinder, it's weird because it's almost like we're making this little construction thing. So there's now noise, and it's almost like I want to print the noise on there. So then we're applying that noise. Let's do the contrast before I forget. And I think, yeah, we're going to want a lion share to be pretty dark. Cool. Yeah, excellent. I'm also going to want to animate this noise. So that is changing over time. Did we just randomly have a very bright spot? Yeah, gotta be careful. Okay, so now that's going around. Now, I have no idea if this is going to work. Can we create another decay? Set it to the maximum permanently. And now that is working. So we're essentially printing on this spot, and it's an animated noise. And now as it moves away, whatever got printed on it here is getting stretched with it. So we're constantly generating new wind. We're generating new sand from here based on whatever that noise is doing. It only gets applied where that cylinder was. So right now it looks a little bit stretchy. So that's mostly a variable of us changing the speed. So I'm going to double it. So we'll say about 33. And let's see if the pattern looks a little bit more normal as far as like, does it feel stretched on X or Z? And I think that feels about right. Okay, cool. And then, is it possible? We don't need to start anymore. Is it possible now to multiply the rocks on top of it? And the rocks, some of the rocks are appearing over here on that edge. Does that make sense? Those are the rocks. Oh, yeah, they're trying to go to the nearest. And this dark one is technically the nearest over there. How much do I want to worry about that? I like it being the separate object up here for something we can reference, but I'm starting to think that maybe it would be better if we just reference the rocks separately in a very similar idea. It's a very similar way. In fact, it's getting a little complicated, so let's make a folder. Inside the folder, I want all that stuff. Wait, where'd they go? What? Do I not understand how folders work? Why did that happen? What? let's try that again. I'm going to select all 4 of those and make a folder. Okay, that was weird. Why did the folder disappear and not show stuff inside of it? Okay, okay, so rocks right now is a map that doesn't exist, so we delete that. Now we got our printer back again. So now we're going to make a new rocks, and the rocks will go into another folder. We're going to do a lot of the same things. We need a curve. And an invert. Now those are darker and probably easier without the invert. Now I'm going to limit them somewhere, much in the way we just limited that via where the roller is. I'll just make a nice clean box field with very little fall off. Stretch this way across. Make the fall off bigger. Make that big enough. And shorter. And have it only applied to the top roller. Okay, cool. So now here I can say box field multiply. And now rocks only appear in the middle. Okay, cool. All that for that. And now I invert the end results. So those are actually darker. And now that those are, this folder is now called printer. This roller is now called rocks. And now, after all that stuff happens, am I allowed to put a decay? Why? Okay, everything's bright here. Now, so if I turn that off and turn this on, does that decay stop the printer from printing? Yes. Yes, it does. Will it... If we make the rocks and we limit the rocks to the box field, so can I give the folder a mask? Interesting. What just happened? Undo. Mask. Okay, so that's a mask for the folder. I'm going to say mask via the box. What does that do? Oh, normal. Okay, cool. So now that's only up there. So now that only multiplies in that spot, right? So we should essentially, yeah, we're seeing the shadow of it there. But I still think that this decay is going to stop the printer from working. So can put that to normal. Don't even care about that. If we put this in here, does that make the streaks? Why? What is happening? This, I feel like those folders have a bug because it just ate my decay. I can hit undo. There's a decay. Activate it. Activating it collapsed the folder. I'm going to pull it out. I'm moving it below the invert, and it disappears. It ate it. Stop eating my decay. Okay, I pulled it out entirely. Under the invert. Okay, see, yeah, see, look, it ate it. That's super weird. Okay, now switch the decay down here. That's a mask after the fact. And now the streaks are appearing only in that part. Multiply, activate. Restart. Print. And then that travels over the rocks. And yeah, you can see that the streaks start stretching from where the rocks are. But, oh, but see, that doesn't work, or it doesn't seem to super work, because do those need to print rocks? Because you see, as soon as we exit that multiplier, that gets forgotten as well. Super tricky. I don't know. Is this interesting at all? Should I move on to a different question? Because like I am interested in the ideas we're doing here, but this might be tedious for people. So comment if you want me to move on to a different question, or if we should keep on exploring. Because like I feel like I'm learning things right now, but that doesn't mean it makes for a good stream. So we're multiplying that multiply. That multiply needs to travel all the way around. So can we have that live forever? That's essentially what we need it to do. So we need this to not get masked. By the way, you can't delete a mask out of a group. I found out like yesterday. You can't delete the stuff inside of it. So now this mask will live forever. And several people have said that they like it. So we're going to keep going. So that printer is going around. But that's on top now. So that streak is erasing out everything that came below. And they'll just keep on erasing out everything that comes from below. So how do we get it to Andreas is asking, what are we actually referencing, or what are we doing? Here was the here's the reference that we started with. So you get the sand effect blowing, and you kind of get these sand, like these little dunes and everything traveling, doing their thing. And you kind of get these sand shadows going, where the sand can survive behind the rock. So yeah, anyway, that's what we're tinkering with. Okay. So the conveyor belt is cool. The streak is fine, but it's the last thing to calculate. So it's going to override anything that comes below it. So as this, let's hit play. You can see we are successfully printing. Then we get our sand shadow, which I think is working. Little hard visually to tell. And give ourselves some extra frames. So now these stripes are coming around, and my question is, does this get to reapply more detail on there? Because I don't think it does. Yeah, see that once it's erased out, it's permanently erased out. I feel like this is like largely a question of if it's possible. I feel like if we move something in the proper location, that we can get it to start working. Because right now, essentially, we need to brighten this back up again. So can we erase out this mask as a reset just to get infinity? Does that even make sense? If we feed in this random field below or above, and that cylinder, did I move it? Oop, gotta be careful. Don't move it. Make a copy. Dagnabbit. I think there's like, yeah, there's definitely some order issues here. Okay, I think that used to be there. Hold down Control, make a copy of it. On the decay, I'm going to say add. Let's turn that on normal. Okay, now we're just seeing the stripe. Cool. Get the streaks. If we're adding the cylinder, which is pretty powerful, and that is intersecting, does this decay will remember that value forever. So if we put it above, I feel like I should be seeing something. Yeah, there's no invert. Add the cylinder on top of the decay. Right now we're just viewing the rocks. Duplicate the cylinder just to make it separate. Did that just disappear from the hierarchy? What's going on? I don't like this hierarchy mysteriousness. Oh, that's where the cylinder field lives, inside of the mask there. Okay. Drop this in there. Say add. Uh-oh. Oh, I thought it froze. I just wasn't hitting play. Okay, drop this above. Why? What am I doing wrong? This cylinder right here. Look, it disappeared again. What's going on with this hierarchy? Cylinder field, this cylinder field 1. Stop doing that. I'm going to drop it here under the invert. So now it exists. So now you see I've got a field 1 above box field. Now click off of it, click back on, and it disappeared. Look, it's just disappearing from the hierarchy. I'm going to save the file and revert. But I feel like there might be a hierarchy bug going on inside of this. Copy, delete, new file, paste, copy, delete, close, paste. Hopefully that is as new of a field as it can be. So now if I drop that inside, so now there's a new cylinder field. Click off, click back on, still disappeared. Well, this one's not necessarily, no, this one was renamed test. I'll rename it again, but it's the only one named test. And then this one, put an X on there. That makes it cool. I'm going to drop it up here. It acknowledged it visually. That's something. Save. Click off of it. Click back on. Still there. Okay. So dropping it directly in this group, it did not like that. Drop it inside now. Set it to add. No idea what's going to happen. Hit play. Okay. Let's see. Also, I'll click off and click back on again. Okay. It still exists. So I don't know for sure, but my current working theory is that dropping something directly in a group is confusing it. So dropping outside the group and then into the group worked better. Now, what we want to do is see if these streaks get erased out as they come up here. They're not, but I kind of expected that. But now if we put this above the decay, see, that's the problem. If you move it above, what just happened? Yeah, see, if you move it above, it just masks it out for that moment that's behind it actively. It's not adding back onto it. And it's like we can't do a maximum and a minimum decay at the same time. I don't think. Because if we took another decay, copy it out of the group just to do it and then put it under. So now this is another decay looking at everything that comes below. I'll set this one to maximum instead. Well, now it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Printer is still printing. But the rocks aren't doing anything. Yeah, I'm kind of stumped on this one now. How do we erase out a decay? The decay has, I mean, does the affect strength? I haven't never really played with the affect strength before. If I put that in there, will that erase out part of it? Wait, that's the wrong decay. That would be this one. I don't need that one. This one. What's going on here? What's going on here? All right, let's pull that out. Streaks. Cool. And if I mask the effect, turn it on. This might work. I don't think it's going to work right now. I think these will pass right over because nothing is telling it to update. But in theory, that is masking out where the effect is getting applied. So if I were to duplicate that again, which I've already got a duplicate here, and I drop that inside, not as a mask. Whoa, it disappeared. Copy. I hate this mask not disappearing. So I'm going to drop that below and then above, or maybe even below, and set that to add. Did that not activate? Okay, let's see what happens. So I don't know if anybody followed what I just did, but we're now saying that this decay, it's super weird. If I twirl that down, it breaks everything. We're saying that this decay is only applying where this mask says it can. And we're saying that that is everywhere except for where the actual cylinder is. And we also made a cylinder saying turn everything white there. So if this turns around here, oh, dang it. I thought that might work. I thought that might allow that to add back in again. Somebody saying that, oh, YouTube was rebuffing. Let me see what mine looks like. Mine's showing. I don't know. Anyway, that was the extent of what my brain can do right now, trying to get that to come back in again. The printing effect is really cool. I hope some people kind of followed it because in a way, let's just look at the printing effect. The printing effect is really cool because in a way, you have to kind of imagine this as a roller, and that roller has imagine a big stamp, like you'd stamp something, like a real life stamp, and this roller is printing onto the surface as this spins away, which is a pretty cool concept. I dig that, but I just cannot think of a way to add something on and subtract because the decay, it just applies to everything that comes below it. And I mean, this process here was already such a hacky thing, or having it animate in this infinite loop. I mean, it's cool that we had that infinite loop working as well as we did. And this is an additive process, so as the second print comes around, it's going to eventually turn this entire thing white because I think the second layer will get brighter and brighter and brighter. Presumably, it should be able to get lighter. Although this random field, yeah, I would assume it gets brighter, but I gotta say I'm surprised it's not getting way brighter. I'm trying to think of something to modify this with because we had a lot of pretty cool things going, but between the weirdness we're getting with the objects disappearing, the mask not being able to be deleted, hierarchies changing with that, the fact that the entire thing would break just because I twirl this up or down, that's not great. I feel like I should just send this whole section of the episode to Maxon to be like, hey, there's hierarchy weirdness. But I've had this happen before. I don't think I've ever captured it before. Yeah, but how do we add that back on again? Because it's we need the delay. I thought the decay, if it was ignored and then overridden, and I'm going to move this up, but I don't think, yeah, see, that's not erasing it out. It's not remembering. Yeah, pretty stumped on that. We could do the displacement as the bit of the experiment. Did we have... How did we get that going? This became a multiply. Yeah. So this is where we are going to... Well, this is as far as we got with it. So how do I translate this? Delete, activate. I need to transfer... I guess it might have been a good idea to still have these rocks as a separate thing, because I do need to reference where those rocks are for that bit of the displacement. And those don't exist in isolation. Maybe it would have been a good idea to break these things out into groups, because then I could be linking to them individually. I mean, I guess it's not technically too late. Let's see, grab. Put that into the group field. Group field is like a folder, but it's an external thing. Although everything disappeared. So the group stuff continues to not to be great. Copy all of those, delete, go into the group field, paste. Okay, now those exist in here. Don't need any of that information. Don't need that. So yeah, now this group field is the rocks. And instead of this being here, this could have just been there, and that does the same thing. It might just be a better version of the groups. Let me see if that does work. Oh no, all the printer stuff disappeared. What is going on with these groups? Good gravy. Okay. Yeah, look. Oh my goodness. Look at this, Maxon. Look, I've got one folder here and one folder here. This stuff is completely unrelated. If I select rocks and hit backspace, delete, it deletes everything inside of both of them. Anyway, I copy and pasted that one, so that's fine. Delete that. So I'm going to rescue all this stuff now. Right click, copy, make a new field group. Oh, they're not pastable. Not sure why. Select, 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 select. Copy, group field, no paste. I'm going to try and copy the entire thing, paste it, and then start deleting out the ones I don't want. I think I just froze cinema. Yeah, I think I killed it. It's dead. Yeah, well, that was me trying to do everything I could to trick cinema into the proper, doing the proper thing, but I think it died. Luckily, luckily with this being on a separate computer now, there's no effect on the live stream. Let's see, what time is it? We got a little bit of time. Did we have other questions coming in? I did have a version save not that long ago, but I at this point, I don't think it's worth continuing. Wow, that was super crash. It took a while to even kill it off. Scroll. Let's see. From I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Magalbu? Would it? Or how would you make a particle system that flies and rotates freely in the wind, but goes back to zero rotation when it hits the ground? Can you give a real, if you're still here, can you give a example? What's a real life example of it? Is there a parallel you're trying to achieve? Because that's a very abstract, specific technical question. Do you guys ever have that where if you close cinema if you close or force quit cinema, that if you click to open it, it doesn't open the first time. You have to like click it a second time and then it opens. I feel like it's gaslighting me. Um, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up a decent amount to get that question and I've lost it now. Oh, there it is. Yeah. It flies around and rotates freely in the wind. Luminetrix is confirming that it doesn't want to reopen the second time. Okay, cool. Like I might have been getting gaslit, but it's not just me. Um, okay, so return back. So there's specifics that matter here. It goes back to 0 rotation when it hits the ground, because there's a difference between going back to its original rotation, which could be random, or going back to just an absolute rotation. But let's just do a very simple version, see if we can get something working. So I'll make a basic emitter, and I've got some presets here. So I will just make a flat rainbow noise. So this is just a preset that I made that just will bloop make that group of particles. So just a quick way of us being able to see everything very clearly. Now we don't need nearly as many. Drop it to 1,000. And I don't do a lot of stuff with rotation, so we're going to take all this with a grain of sand. Grain of sand? Grain of salt? I think it's grain of salt. Okay, so what I like doing when I want to see direction, yes, I know you can change the display mode, but I like it being a little more literal. So I can make a pyramid, make it in the cloner, clone onto an object. The object will be the particle group. And then face it on Z plus, which I think is forward, scale them down. And then I like making it real obvious. So I take the pyramid, I make it extra long on Z. Oop, X, Y, Z. By Z, does that mean that becomes, yeah, okay, so there. And I make one of the sides really long and this one flat. So see how this is giving me a lot of directional information now, and it's like very, very visual. So click on the cloner, that's on the object. It's taking on, I don't care about velocity or scale, but it should be taking on the color and the rotation. Right now, nothing moves anywhere. That's fine. Go back to the emitter and go back to basic properties. I can go to alignment, and right now it's the velocity direction. So if they were emitting, they'd be going forward. But we could say, well, give me a random direction, and let's hit play. And yeah, we see that everything is now created in these random directions. So that's cool. So yeah, now they've all been born at random directions. And then I'm going to say, give it some angular velocity. We've got options here. Velocity direction. I'm going to say, give it a, I'm essentially saying, give it a random spin of up to 90 degrees. And let's just see what that does. Might be way too fast. No, not too fast at all. Okay, so all of these are, and we can give it a little bit of base speed. Well, you can say 90. That should be fine. Okay, cool. So now we got a whole bunch of these drifting around, doing whatever they want, randomly moving. And then we'll make a turbulence. Reasonable scale, 25 strength, and then we need a friction, just to calm it down. Okay, so all of these are born. They're completely independently drifting whatever direction they want to, like just via that initial spin. We could use all sorts of modifiers and tell it to spin different ways for different reasons with different properties, but that's pretty much doing what I wanted it to do. So now I think I'm just going to make a very simple floor, or let's even just make a sphere. That could be interesting. We'll make a sphere, make it decently big, and we'll try using a stick. I don't use stick very often. I find it slightly unintuitive. Well, the basic stick makes sense to me, but that in order to use this one, we do need to say that this is a collider. So that is now a collision surface. And I want to stick to it. So after all that other stuff, I'm going to say stick, and this will now stick to, I think, anything. So yeah, as that stuff is striking it, I think it should be getting stuck to it. Let's see. It's hard to tell. Yeah, boop. You see them suddenly snap to it. That's based on this radius. So we could, shrink that down and make it a little more accurate. And it's a good idea to say collide on both sides. Okay, so now they will stick to the surface, but you see they keep on spinning. That's actually fine. Okay, so now essentially I want to say as soon as something sticks to the surface here, do something. Now what's cool is we can make a new particle group, and any of these collider types, maybe not pyro, but under the stick, you can see that once something is stuck, it can actually trigger a condition for us. And I can say, hey, swap to a different group. So now we're in this new group. So now that's in a new group, all these things that are universal, like the turbulence, etc., those are all, they are all saying like, yes, these still apply. But now it's in a new group and we can apply things specifically to that. So I'm going to grab something like there's spin, there's look, there's turn. I'm going to try, well, there's look, random. Random might be static, but let's actually try random. So if I drop this in and say the look forward, or the direction is going to be just random alignment up, that's fine. And now I just want to see, whoa. Why, what? Why are they disappearing now? Oh, that makes sense. They're switching groups, but this cloner is only cloning onto this particle group. That is fine. What I need to do is select both my particle groups, make a multi-group, and now say my cloner is not cloning onto one particle group, it's cloning onto this multi-group. So now even when it changes groups, it's still like, oh, okay, cool, you exist. Okay, so now we get all these drifting along. And I'll scoot this forward for the next one. But when something strikes, let's see what happens. Boop. Okay. Look, alignment up. The look rate's 100. They still seem like they're spinning a bit. But this I'm going to say custom. Custom is like an app. Okay, cool. Custom just means like, all right, you're going, this is your rotation now. So you can see that now, as anything strikes it, it is just popping into it. I want these to collide a little bit more often. So let's make a gentle wind just blowing in that direction. So now we should see that whenever something strikes it, it's just going to pop. Let's see. Blink. Yeah, snap, snap, snap. So it is taking on orientation now that we've collided, or whatever condition. This just happens to be the one I made. But here's what my hope is we've got this look rate. So I'm going to say your look rate is only 5%. So now the hope is, let's try and if we can see something strike. So what I hope and am thinking is going to happen is that every frame that's collided is getting another 5% of this rule applied to it. So you see that's spinning, but given enough time, do they all eventually do that orientation? I'm going to shrink them all down a bit. It's taking a little bit to get there, so I might speed them up a bit. 15. Spinning, spinning. I wonder, I'm going to put this up pretty high. Okay, that maybe makes sense. So this is me telling it to be in a particular direction, but the direction it's facing, I think, is unrelated to the current spin. Let me check YouTube. That's there. I paused it earlier. I think that this is constantly applying. So when I said 100%, it was overriding it perfectly. But if we drop it down even like a little bit, I feel like they still get to maintain some of their velocity. And look is not the same as the spin. And here is spin. So let's just see. Yeah, as these strike, I've got a lot of percentage on there. But you see it's still moving. So yeah, I think spin is unrelated. And this is just overriding. So I haven't used spin very much. But let's say that you're also affecting the spin. Add speed. Actually, yeah, I don't like this spin. But what I think we can do is a math. Let's use math. Say once you've changed groups, you are going to multiply the angular velocity speed by 0.9. So let's temporarily turn off look. So now what's happening is it's saying once you've entered this group, whatever your current speed is, go 90% of it, and then go 90% of that, and then go 90% of that, and then go 90% of that. So the hope here is that it's going to slowly decelerate. Okay, that's decelerated really quick. Multiply angular velocity speed by 0.9. Well, if I say 1, it should keep spinning, to the best of my knowledge. Okay, yeah, that kept spinning. So is it just not strong enough? 0.99? Does that update? Is it slowing down? Yeah, it's slowing down. Why did that 9 seem to go so fast? 0.9. Okay, cool. That decelerated. Wind, stronger. All right, let's see. Boop. Maybe those just weren't spinning that fast. Let's look at that yellow one. Yeah, look at the yellow. Okay, cool. The yellow snapped and it slowed down. It looks like a little goes a long way. So that is actually something we do know, is that like this is a very similar mathematical function to like what friction used to do. And remember, I used to say friction in rigid bodies, that friction essentially didn't do anything until you got like to 0.9, and all the good stuff happened between like 0.9 and then 0.999. So those are hitting and then decelerating. Now, I think that what might help is let's get the initial ones to be spinning like way faster. Okay, so those are going crazy spinning. So now we can really see. So yeah, now when it strikes, if you look at it, look, decelerates and then eventually stops spinning. So now we can clearly see it's happening. So now that they actually do lose their spin velocity, can we now also apply the look? And I'm going to say a look rate of 10%. And is that enough to... it was turned off at the beginning. We might need to restart the simulation. Is that enough to make it start looking in this direction? Waiting for a strike. There's one. Decelerating. I'm going to increase my power. Oh, look is... No, but look is not based on it moving, right? If I do 100%, that's a thing. And again, I don't want to be that high. I want to slowly fade into that direction. But these are just like losing their angular velocity and then stopping. They're not taking on the new rotation. We could just override it and snap them in. I don't want to do that. Turn? To tell you the truth, the look is... I don't have very good... If there's anything I don't have good intuitions for in the new particles, it is the look, spin, turn. So I'm going to try putting a turn in there. Leave it at the default. But this is alignment to the axis. I'm going to say look to a custom direction. Is that giving us the same trouble? I'm going to turn off this look. No, that's still not doing anything either. Yeah, so we get the deceleration, but in a particular look direction or turn direction, I'm not having a lot of luck. Turn, vector space, global, custom direction. I mean, that's pretty definitive. That's saying turn in that direction. Friction is only applying to the acceleration. It's not affecting the angle. turn. Yeah, it's capped at 1,000 or at 100. I thought maybe the math is also affecting it, but that doesn't make any sense. Angular velocity speed, angular velocity as an absolute, but there's no, we can't point it. There's no like point in a direction here, so we can't do it via math. Well, see, that was weird. Did you see that? I just changed it from custom. I changed it to random, and then suddenly a bunch of them moved. I'm not sure what to make of that. Let's wait until some collide and do it again, and everybody keep an eye on it. So they hit, and you see it does a really nice job of decelerating. Like they collide, they slow down. So that part's working perfectly. But now, after we got to kind of look at this cluster right here, so I'm going to say random direction, and then suddenly you see all of them shift to get to some new random direction. So that's fine, but why is it not treating my custom direction the same? Like I just said, okay, go to this custom thing. Here's a vector. Maybe when I was on custom, was it all 0, 0, 0? Because maybe it needs an orientation. Oh, I'm going to feel kind of silly if... Did I just not put a vector in there? X, Y, Z? X, Y, Z. What direction is that? Yeah, the Z. Why are they facing not the orientation I think they should be? Does it have to do with a combination of the up vector and the vector? I go to alignment up. Okay, those are all, are they? Yeah. See, they do seem to start facing off that way. Now I want them to face inward. Oh, is that going to be? No, Y aims up. Some of the vectors seem confused, but that's okay. But strangely, yeah, X, Y, Z, when I set it to Z, so I think before we did have a value, it was just on Z. And you can see it actually is doing an excellent job of aiming on X, and it's kind of on Y, but Z, it's not acknowledging it. So watch, if I go put this on X, you see all of them immediately start rotating to X. So the reason it wasn't working is that we were telling it to go on Z, and it doesn't seem to be acknowledging the Z. Now, is it doing that because of yeah, and this should be slowly. This should now be, we've decelerated from the speed they were going, and independently, and this turn shouldn't be doing anything, I don't think. Yeah, so you decelerate, and then eventually, over time, it's aiming on X, which is cool. Now, I'm going to say, don't aim on X, aim on Z. I want them aiming inward. Now, is that possibly because of this alignment? No. Why not on that direction? I mean, is that, it's so weird because it's working on one vector and not another. Is there a bug here? Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it feels pretty clean at this point. Is there a bug where like they accidentally, like on a vector, typed in do X, do Y, and then they just didn't do Z? Like there's a typo in the Z parameter. Because I gotta say, I'm kind of stumped as to what else I could do here. I feel like these are all the right properties. Yeah, I can't. Well, it goes to that's custom. Maybe, I'm going to say target, and I'll say target the sphere. So maybe they'll be able to successfully aim inward at the sphere, which is another cool effect. But it this demonstrates, yeah. See, now they are successfully aiming at the center of the sphere. I am starting to think that there's a bug in the look at Z property because now you see these are all eventually slowing down and successfully aiming on the inside, um, which is pretty much exactly what I wanted it to do. I am curious. I'm going to turn off this math though, and I want to see if they do. Do we need both of these now that we have the look actually working on a low percentage? Do we also need to decelerate their acceleration, their angular velocity, or would they just keep on spinning and spinning and spinning forever? With just a tiny percentage looking in the direction we want, which I gotta say, I think they're getting stuck and they are spinning. So yeah, independent, we have to slow them down and we are slowly telling them to look in the proper direction. So yeah, as soon as I activate that, they slow down and they're slowly aiming the direction they want. So there we go. Yeah, two things you got to keep in mind. This turn has nothing to do with anything. And right now, I think there's a bug in the look custom. And each of these will stick and look in the direction we want. So there you go. That's what I got. Cool. I will save that. Also, I'll save it just in case if I get somebody from Maxon to watch this, they might need that file. Soft target on soft target on spin. I cannot type on this laptop keyboard. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to see if there's any questions to whip through. We're a little bit over, but that's fine. Aren't there rocks, Matt? Oh, yeah. Larry, I appreciate the comment or the trying to be helpful for the earlier thing. Animated cartoon burst. Oh, Herm, that's Herm. If you're still here, you saw one of my file names because I remember that. Yeah. So we got cartoon bursts. So I'll just pop that open if you're curious. I think I probably showed it off, but let's see if I hit play. I think it'll just kind of work. Control D, simulation, scene, running the GPU. A lot of these old files I had set on CPU because my PC wasn't working. Oh yeah, so this is kind of like these little laser bursts. Pew pew. Yeah, trying to go for like this cartoony, like blast effect, which is cool. And then this one, similar but different. This one's kind of like a nuke exploding, where you get this burst. And then thanks to the flocking behavior, the particles start trying to coalesce to each other. And then you end up getting these gaps. So you still get the coherent initial explosion, but then you start gathering into like these little thin tendrils, which is pretty cool. Which also, by the way, is a lot of the way the universe is formed, where you kind of get these big galactic tendrils, galactic filaments, and these large voids in between them. So pretty cool. Really straightforward setup. You see there's not even that much going on here as far as particles. A little bit of turbulence for some randomness and then some flocking. Jonathan saying, how about that rain? We did a little bit of rain last week. I'm not going to make anything from scratch, but was that a file of mine you're talking about or no? And then I had a different cartoon. I thought this cartoon burst was actually a different one. What's this? That's not it. I had a cool one, but it could be any of these files. Definitely not that one. Mesh nuke bursts. Nice fog. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it was. Unfortunately. Let's see. I saw a different question earlier. Demi is asking, can we use connectors to connect pieces of a Voronoi fractured cube with elastic ropes? I'm not even sure connectors work with ropes. Connectors may it wouldn't be a connector, right? I mean, splines use, oh, maybe when you say connector, you mean this connector. I thought you were talking about the connectors here. When you said connector, I thought you meant connector, but you really meant connector. Yeah, are connectors even a thing on splines? I kind of feel like they're not. Let's see. Subdivided, simulation, rope. Wait, what was your point? Connect? Can you use ropes to connect the pieces of Voronoi fractured cube with elastic ropes? Okay, I more understand what your question is now. In theory, the problem is I can't think of any automatic way. Okay, I'm intrigued, but I can't think of any automatic way of getting the connections. Maybe we can do something with a mesh to spline to do it parametrically. Otherwise, I feel like it would be so tedious. So let's do the most basic possible version. We'll do a single break. So I think we need 2 source points. Yeah, so 2 pieces. Okay, cool. And then, well, it goes to like, there's no way to put a rope between these right now because they're physically touching. So I think we have to offset the fragments. So, the assumption here is like, okay, cool. These are separated out from each other now. It's like, okay, well, now they're separated out from each other. Although this is going to be a bit of a challenge. Like, well, essentially what I think it would work if you manually draw a spline from there to there and there to there to there to there, which is all well and good. But how do you do it parametrically? It would be my assumption of what you want to do. And I don't know if it's possible, but if I make a second one of these and we invert, there is now the opposite one here. But there's a tool I really want to make, which is, let me just show you. So what I want to do, if we're going to do it parametrically, the only way I can think to do it is throw this into a mesh to spline. So now we got this mesh to spline actually, making an outline of these chunks. And we could turn all of these into ropes right now, which is what we're going to do. But what I want to do is erase out everything except for the really short ones, because those are the actual connections. These extra ones are just kind of there. And there's no setting that I can think of anywhere in cinema that we can isolate out only the big ones where we can erase out the tiny ones. Well, and it goes to like, technically with my mesh or with my utility splines, we could do something like, I'll say smooth, but then get rid of it. So it's not doing anything except for, it's not doing anything right now. But then we can set this minimum length. Oh, and also let's go into our mesh to spline and say exploded. So every single one of those is separate. And I'll also say, hey, respect the n-gons. Okay, so now each of those is its own little individual spline. So now inside of smooth, I can start increasing this threshold. And now you can see I can erase out the tiny ones. And then we're going to be left with only the biggest of the lines. But there's nothing, that function essentially only exists in my tool. And there's no tool to do the inverse of that. There's no way for me to do the opposite. So having said that, is it possible? We have a lot of extra connections here, but you see we do indeed get those splines in between. So if I feed this again, let's put that into a resample. And if I double click on the icon, you can see the subdivisions is created. And you can see that's a very reasonable number of subdivisions in between. Double click, and now we actually see them. So now, can we make a rope? And on this one, can we make a rigid body? And then can we add a connect on there? And I just don't know. Connector connects to other objects. I'll say update live. And this is claiming to have made connections in all those locations. So, it's fine. I believe it. So now we'll go to simulation, scene, turn off gravity, and then make a simple turbulence. Large scale, pretty weak. Okay, so now Let's hit play and see what happens. Well, okay, we got those ropes. Yeah, okay, you see those ropes were there. I don't know if that one disconnected or if it broke. But there's something that you got to keep in mind. These ropes are, that's really interesting where those broke, because there's not inherently a braking parameter. You can turn on braking, but okay, so you see those are connected, but you see these are kind of like really getting pulled around, which is cool. But ropes, when they come out of the box, I think they have very, very little mass. So we have to go into the rope, and here they have mass. And even mass, I wish it wasn't mass. I wish it was density. Because right now it's always relative to, like, it might be relative to like the length of the rope. So we could say, hey, these ropes are now 10 times heavier than they look like they are. So now if we hit it, let's see if they aren't going to stretch as much. Because now it's kind of like, hey, like I'm a more, yeah, look, by setting this to be 10 times stronger, they're not stretching apart nearly as much as they were. So these are each now being like, no, I'm way more stuck. And now if we say like it's 100 times the mass that they look like they have, now I think that this is barely going to be able to stretch away from it, like, at all. Brink. Yeah, you see it immediately yanked it back. But you see we're starting to get that little separation going, which you can improve with steps per frame, but there's not like a magic single bullet solution. But now that we proved the very basic version, and we'll save this because it's working well enough. 5A, actually 5A underscore mesh to spline underscore utility splines. That's just so people who get the scene file know that they need a plugin to use it. Voronoi connection. Actually, what's working out surprisingly well, Voronoi rope connections. What's working out surprisingly well here is those long ropes are probably still getting calculated, but because they're constantly touching the mesh, they just automatically got connected to the mesh perfectly. But anyway, the simple version worked pretty well. So now if I grab both Voronois, we go to sources and we start increasing this. I'll say 10. We get 10 chunks. The mesh to spline automatically updated. Although, oh, okay. Oh, okay, interesting. So it's making this thing in the gaps, but it's not, it's an n-gon. So there is no connections here. So can we, it's hull only, invert, optimize and close holes, create n-gon surfaces, turn that off. Okay, so now it's created all these extra connections in theory. I did on both. I don't need both. I need it only on this one. Don't create the n-gon there. So now it's done all those. So now mesh the spline is converting all of those. You see we get all these little woven interconnections, which is cool. And then resample them. And the one thing we definitely have to do is go back into our connect, and you see the connects all look super crazy because it's not updated from the previous one. So we just have to change any value and now it will update. So now all the long ones have gotten welded directly to the surface, and all the corner ones in theory have only gotten welded directly to the relevant point. Everything else in theory is working. You see, actually, that's interesting. Oh, well, you see that this n-gon here, that n-gon's not doing a great job. Well, it just needed this extra point. So you get this long line traveling there. So not ideal. I mean, it just goes to n-gons aren't going to go exactly where you want them to go. So we're going to get a couple lines that aren't great, but as parametric as I could make it, all of those are connected. And I should be able to just hit go again. And yeah, some strings just seem to never have been connected, but the ones that are connected, whoa, calm down. I'm going to make the mass a little more calm. But yeah, there seems to still be some energy getting into the system somewhere. Whoa, 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 whoa. Boing, boing. I mean, it's kind of fun. I mean, it's working better than I thought we'd be able to get it, because I thought those extra ropes along the edges were going to cause us trouble, but they just got welded onto the object. But yeah, there's some a lot of energy getting introduced here. Like if this is with no turbulence. So eventually something is getting tugged in a crazy way. Target length, stretchiness. Give it a bit of stretchiness. Does that calm it down? No. Whee! I mean, we could, put some big friction in here. I'm just trying to think of a way to calm that down. But it goes to we're using rigid bodies here, and like rigid bodies can be pretty wacky sometimes. I guess as the experiment, I could set those to be a soft body cloth, and we'll just say it's a pretty stiff cloth. And we might need to make the connections again, so I'll just change the number. And interestingly, it looks like those lines don't make all those little connections on a cloth, so there might be extra little ropes hanging around. But let's just see what happens with the cloth. Yeah, see, the cloth is instantly way calmer. Definitely something that something's not perfect, but way calmer. I love the cloth. I'm not super sold on the current rigid bodies as they are. They're a little bit random. But yeah, anyway, I hope that kind of answers the question. Let's see. Jonathan was asking, there was a stylized cartoon rain by Everything CG, which I'm assuming is maybe an Instagram account or something like that, called Stylized Rain VFX Houdini plus Octane. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little late to start a bigger question like that. I'm totally down for trying to tackle it again. Tobias, I saw you had a question earlier. I'll definitely post it next time. I'll try and jump on it. I guess I got to track down another guest because that could be cool. I want to keep guests coming in the show. And then I did prepare a copy paste. Oh, and I should mention again, let me switch my screen. Where is the software? Nope, wrong keyboard. Switch here. For anybody who wasn't here, I mentioned that Gumroad finally has bundles. So the first Rocket Lasso bundle is out. You get 30% off of all the spline tools if you get all of them at the same time here. So that's another good way of supporting Rocket Lasso. So I'll copy that and put it into the two chats for anybody who's interested in checking it out. And it is the absolute best way of supporting Rocket Lasso. And then I also, where's my notes? There's my notes, copy and paste. Anyway, here is all the different ways to follow Rocket Lasso. So I should probably, oh, come on, it's gonna not format very well. Shift paste. Well, apologies for the ugly formatting. You can copy and paste out of there. Twitch will probably do it better. Yeah, Twitch does it nicely. YouTube did it terribly. But yeah, you can follow. You can follow on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Join the newsletter or join the Slack channel. So you should do all of those things, definitely. But anyway, I think that's going to wrap up another episode of Rocket Lasso Live. This was episode 5. We're already in season 6, which is absolutely crazy. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Lots of good questions today. We'll be tackling more again next week, which I look forward to. If I didn't get to your question, please hold on to it for next week. I would love to check it out then. But for now, I think that's going to wrap this on up. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.